Hello, everyone. It's amazing to be here, part of the CSV conference. It's our first CSV conference to say, and it's amazing. We're going to quickly introduce ourselves first so that you know who you're talking to, and then I'm going to say a few words about the topic we have today, which you also see on the screen already, and maybe a few words about the company we're working for, but we're not going to get into details. So first of all, I am Daniela. And I'm Monika. Yeah, I thought you want to introduce yourself. We are originally coming from Bulgaria. That's where we're also located. We're working at the Ethiopian. This is a fully remote company. We don't have a physical office anywhere. And the mission of the company is just to enable organizations and also individuals to drive meaning out of data. So basically, we believe that data only matters if it's used. And that's what we're trying to do. We're building open source solutions mostly. And we are, no, it's too early, but anyway, we're building open source solutions and other data solutions. But the idea is that we unlock the potential and we drive value out of the data. But today we're at the CSV conference, and we want to start from the CSV. So CSVs might be small files, typically, but they carry really big weight. So they power open data, they fuel research, they drive innovation, they drive accountability as well, or at least they're supposed to. But they're supposed to empower people, right? The problem is when the CSV files are locked away in portals that aren't really being used, which, you know, instead of driving innovation and enabling transparency, they just gather digital dust. That's why we want to talk about today why data portals are failing and how to make yours succeed. Because if the CSVs, if they're the bricks in the data world, the portals are the bridges. And if the bridges collapse, then the data can't actually reach the people who need it. So, long story short, we have seen both at the Ethiopian. Today we want to look beyond the CSV. Okay, we want to look at the people, the culture, the processes who are responsible for making the data usable. Because at the end of the day, it's not the files. It's creating a living ecosystem in which the data matters, in which the data makes a difference. So I just want to get a sense of the audience here. So I just want to check with people, and you can just raise your hand. So who here has visited the data portal in the last year? Okay, it's actually the majority, great. How many of you found what you needed? Yeah, I can already see a few hands went up. There are various reasons for that. Obviously, we're going to address some of them in today's presentation. So let's just maybe move on a little bit. Okay, in terms of today's agenda, quickly, we're going to do an introduction, part of which we already did. We're going to talk about or recap the problem that I briefly surfaced. 3 reasons portals fail, with real examples for failure and success, failure in terms of the mission they have, and what we can do to address this. We're going to close and questions, obviously, at the end. If there's any pressing question, you can always ask, but let's try to stick to the end because we don't have a lot of time. Just quickly, because I'm aware of the time, I included this image because I wanted to explain what we're doing. And we're here at the bottom left, like the Ethiopian. So before somebody actually decides what solution they're going to be using for publishing data, they need to come to the conclusion that they need a data portal, right? They might need internal data sharing system or something else, like some BI tools. But, so that's the first level, okay? So first you need to come to the conclusion, okay, I actually need a data portal. Second level, you start looking for solutions. And there are plenty of solutions out there, which are, by the way, all quite decent and stable and reliable and well developed. Like we've listed some in the middle, you can have a look. We are focused on CCAN, obviously, where the pointers are. And below one level down, we have different stewards and vendors providing services. And that's us. Okay, let's move on. I'm not going to get into details anymore. I think you got a sense of Datopian and who we are. We're building data portals, making data accessible, and other data solutions. Okay, and we've been doing it for 2 decades. So the problem for today is that most of the portals are built for compliance or delivery, but not for people. Governments, they're mandated to open their data, so mostly they're just ticking a box. NGOs, they have some sponsors and donors so that they need to report to, so that's what they're building it for, some of them. And some organizations just want to come across as very data-driven because it's very modern, and that's what they're doing it for as well. But if you forget to ask the important questions at the end, like who's actually going to use this portal, why do they need it, how are they going to access the data, will they quickly and easily find what they're looking for, and crucially, who owns the data portal after its launch, which is one of the breaking points. If you forget to ask these questions, the outcome is very predictable, unfortunately, and it just doesn't serve a purpose. So you just see portals that aren't being used, data sets that are just there, but nobody's using, or nobody can rely on because they don't know if they can, or the metadata is not great, or whatever the reason is. And we've seen both, and now we just want to go into some of the main reasons that we've observed. So I'll let Monika speak to the first reason. Thank you. So there could be many reasons why a data portal may fail. But within this presentation, we decided to look into the 3, from our point of view, main ones, or the most common ones. But not just the main or the most common ones, but also the actionable ones, because we can talk all we want about the problems, but if they're not actionable, the discussion is not going to be very productive. So the first reason that we want to look into is the lack of user stories. And usually, very often, the data portals fail not because the data is bad, or because the tool is bad, or because the interface is ugly. They fail because they lack user story. They're not based on the users that are going to use the portal, and they're not revolving around their needs. They're actually created very often. People, when they come to us, for example, they're like, hey, I saw this very cool feature on this other data portal, or this other organization is building this amazing data visualizations tool, we should have the same one. Or basically people are asking themselves, what features can we build? And it's not asking, hey, who are we building this data portal for? Who are the stakeholders? Who are the data stewards? And what are their needs that we can address? So maybe some of you know what the user story looks like, but we are showing an example here. And it looks like something as a, and here is the place where you add the type user, for example, as a data geek. I want to avoid downloading a 10 GB CSV file. That's the goal. And then so that, and that's the outcome that you're aiming for, so that I want to avoid my laptop to sound like a, I don't know, a jet engine. Maybe not the best user story example, but you get the point. Alternatively, you can also work with job stories. For example, when, and here you're describing the situation, when I'm sharing a data set with my colleague, I want them to understand straight away what's about, and without calling me or whatever, so that I can enjoy my holiday or weekend. And here you're writing down the expected result. As I said, maybe not the best examples, but you get the point. You're clearly describing who the users is, what's the type, what's the goal, what's the motivation, what's the situation, what's the motivation. So it's very important to have this clear picture of the users and the situations. The problem is many data portals are created backwards. You're not starting with the question, who are we building it for and why, what are their needs? It starts with what can we build? You can maybe switch to the next one. So we have prepared some real life examples. However, unfortunately, we cannot disclose the names of the companies that we're talking about because of obvious reasons, but you can get a sense of more or less what the situation was and how it went. So in the first case, we had an NGO that we worked with in Canada. They were in the teaching sector. We were creating a internal data management system for them, or portal. And the main problem in this situation was that their partners weren't technical. Their partners were mostly teachers. They were expected to work with this tool that we created. And they had even difficulties filling out the metadata form or uploading the data and so on. And Joel actually showed you previously, maybe he didn't show exactly the traditional CCAN workflow, but more or less he showed what it looks like for those of you who are not familiar with CCAN. So there you have to fill out the metadata first, then you upload the data and so on. So basically they struggle to fill out the metadata. And this really caused a lot of difficulties and them not using the portal. And the problem is not that the tool is too technical, sophisticated or something, and the problem is not in the partners either, it's in a mismatch. There's obviously not a match between the people who are going to be using the portal and the tool that's going to be used. Versus the other case, which we had in Africa, it's again NGO, similar setup, similar situation, but this time they started with the user stories and they included the users early. They were even part of the team. 2 people, they were in the team and they were providing feedback all the time. They were involved in the whole process. So the organization had a good sense of who the people are, who the portal is created for, what their needs are. And you can guess what the outcome was. It was very successful. It's still using and serving its purpose until today. I forgot to mention, so in the second case, it was again non-technical people, but how we address this, we created this very easy to use tool with drag and drop for dragging and dropping the file, the data, and then there's this metadata AI tool, which pre-populates the metadata, and we integrated it into the project because we knew that we're going to be working with, and we're creating the portal for non-technical users. And this made the project flourish, basically. Yeah. So to summarize, what works? Different user types should be mapped from the start. The feature should be adapted to their needs. And if ideally the right tool, obviously maybe almost any tool can be adapted to the situation, but it would be great to start with the user story even prior to picking the tool so that you know what the needs are and address them. And now Daniela's gonna walk you through the second reason. Yes, and I realize I think we're a little bit behind schedule, so I'm gonna surface and not get into a lot of details. The second reason we found is that it's not agile, and here we might frustrate a couple of people. But just to say, we realize governments are dealing with procurement, lengthy process, and so on and so forth. So we realize this is not going to go away. So we're going to need to comply with it. But in software development, as you know, things are super dynamic. Technology is changing. Data is evolving. The data needs are changing. So often, if clients are not flexible, and if we're not flexible as well, if we're not agile, we are risking to get outdated. So by the time it's delivered, it's already outdated. So when the clients are flexible, when they stay agile and welcome change, this is what basically works. The opposite doesn't really work very well. So I can get into the examples quickly because I have one very clear in front of me right now because I was involved in the one on the left. So it's a project in the Scandinavian countries. It was, as always, they have this rigid RFPs with a lot of requirements and procurement and a lot of things you need to deliver up front, and the detailed plan and the acceptance test and blah blah blah. So every feature had to be detailed out before we even touched anything, before we even got access to the infrastructure, before we even how can you even define tests for something that you don't know will be, right? But anyway, so we've done it. And now that's the difference between the two cases. In the first case, and I've actually intentionally selected 2 countries from the Scandinavians because they have some similar rules. In the first case, the clients really insisted on staying compliant, following the plan, and so on and so forth, which is actually one of the very few projects that we didn't put on end. Whereas in the other case, they were welcoming change, so they were fine when requirements had to change a little bit, because when you really roll up your sleeves, this is when you start working, this is when you know what will be required, what will be needed. Monika mentioned also involving the users early, so that, because when you think of it, the clients compiling the requirements are different from us who are actually delivering the portal, who are different from the users who are actually using it. So you really need to take all of this into account, and as many useful stakeholders you can involve, the better things are. Summarizing what works, treat the plan as a guide, keeps client closed, do some baby steps, agile process, small iterations, and looping users early. And last reason, thank you. Last reason that we will look into is the lack of ownership. And the main problem when it comes to the ownership is that most organizations think of data portal project as some kind of a IT deliverable, something that they develop, they launch, and that's basically it. That's everything. It's a one-off thing that it doesn't require any continuous attention. That is not the case, and it's probably just a wrong way to look at it. It's an ongoing project. It requires care. It requires attention. It might not require your 24 hours both attention on it, but it requires some. You can even look at it as a baby. You know, it's your baby. You have to, even though at some point it stops requiring your all the time attention, it still requires some care. It still requires someone to upload, to update the data, to update, to make sure that there's metadata standards in place, that the portal's up to date, there's upgrades, security patches, that everything's moving in the right direction. Also, the market's very dynamic, and things and needs are evolving. They need to ensure that the portal keeps up with needs of people. However, very often also ownership falls between departments. The IT are taking care of keeping the portal up and running, but the data stewards are taking care of the data, but the communications think it's not their job. So basically, there is no clear ownership, and everyone's looking at their small little chunk of work, and nobody's looking at the big picture. Or people leaving the company, stuff changes, and also everyone knows that it's easier to get budget for a new project instead of for keeping one up and running and for maintenance. And this lack of organization, lack of clear role and responsibility is the problem. I see that we don't have time, but we have some example. Basically, in one of the cases, we didn't have clear structure, we didn't have internal resources, and in the other case, we did have dedicated team, dedicated PO. They were really active, really engaged, and you can guess which portal flourished and which one just sat there up and running and nobody's looking into it. So position the project as ongoing services, make the roles and responsibilities clear, also for the period after the launch. Also, you can include capacity building, involve the teams, documentation, make sure it's well documented, and also plan ahead, not just until the launch. And on to the closing. Daniela's going to close. So we're running out of time. Okay, sorry. So I think we underestimated the time we have. So, but what I want to say is, I think what we've observed is that every failure was related to people. I don't want to blame people. I just want to say often the technology works, CSVs work, CCAN works, like the actual data solution works. But if we don't build the right process around it, it's just set up to failure. So without clear ownership, allocating resources after launch, and like not being flexible enough to accommodate any changes, unfortunately, projects are set up to failure, and then I just want to say this is great for us because it means we have control, right? I mean, it's up to all of us here to actually take all of this into consideration, start asking the right questions. And I think that's what we need to start paying more attention to, and that's what's a little bit underestimated. But yeah, I think that's it for today. Really, thank you. Sorry for the rush, and I hope you found something meaningful in everything. But I don't think we have time for questions, right?
Thank you.